Hi. Today we will
Hello.
speak with about your piece, about your NFT piece, Sigils of Sacred Magia. Can you just shortly introduce to us to the piece? What is concept of the piece and what triggered you to create this piece?
So, Sigils of Sacred Magia is a bit my playful take on what music in the crypto space or what composition in crypto space could be. It was commissioned for the exhibition Process and Protocol, and I began thinking, looking at what's happening. It was in the peak of the NFT craze before the big crypto winter that we are kind of now in. And I was always a bit also agnostic or skeptical about the direction, especially of the coins, that everyone are minting coins and inventing, new types of currency, and are then trying to make quick buck and rug pulling and get rich or die and hold on to your life and all these silly catchphrases. But I also noticed that a lot of the terminology there is coming from the world of fantasy. The second biggest coin that we minted the work on is Ethereum, based on the idea of Ether from early 20th century. In order to communicate between the blockchain and the real world, you use oracles. There are coins that are called mana in Decentraland. And all these big tech companies, if they're big enough, they become unicorns. And the biggest tech company in Silicon Valley, we call them the riders of the apocalypse. So this kind of eschatological, magical, phantasmagorical discourse is really, I think, deep inside this kind of like a tech utopia thing. And then also comes to mind the quote of Arthur C. Clarke that any kind of technology, if it's advanced enough, it becomes indistinguishable from magic. So this kind of like fuzzy line between the technique and the magical, and how they kind of are fused or are entangled, was kind of the departure point. It was the departure point also for conversations, because I collaborated in this work with the curator of the show, Brandon Farnsworth, that helped a lot in the thinking and developing the ideas, and Daniel Chen, that helped with the technical aspects of minting and dealing directly with the technology. Because again, I'm not, it's the only NFT that I've made, and it was on kind of upon request. I'm not an NFT artist by any means. I kind of used the crypto as a playground, just as a new context, as a new environment. It's there, it's gonna stay. I thought that it's interesting. And I thought that maybe let's try and realize something in a concrete way that would maybe capture these ideas. So then I got back to a text that I already worked a bit with. It's a magical book from 15th century by esoteric, like a Kabbalist scholar, rabbi named Abramelin, or Rabbi Abraham of Worms, Dalmatia. And he writes in this book of practical magic all kinds of magical squares that have allegedly magical qualities. They can make changes that are not otherwise possible in the world, making things appear, making things disappear. And this particular magic, the first work I composed with this text was called Abramelin from 2015, where I composed a magic square that its purpose is making music appear. So kind of by composing the text and reading and following it closely, also the process of casting this magic, I kind of make the magic happen in a way. And for this, I was very happy to stumble on another magic square there that is making coins appear in your wallet officially in times of trouble. And I thought that this could be a lovely text because we are already dealing with this thing. I mean, the whole idea of currency and money is a social construct, right? There is nothing intrinsic in value in those pieces of paper. Since the 70s, where the gold standard is off, there is nothing that backs it up. I mean, before you could say, yeah, but it's analog with amounts of gold, but it's no more. It's completely virtual, and this kind of belief is the only thing that keeps it afloat. And I thought it could be really nice to try and generate this value, whether artificial or real, by composing the text that is exactly about this process of the value being generated, but explicitly stating that it is, it is an angel that is giving you these coins. They just appear magically in your wallet. While if you actually buy the NFT, it magically appears in your wallet. And I don't think that probably there are way more people that deal with the crypto space and blockchain, that they just interact with it, but without actually understanding it. So for them, it is in a way magical.
But you have, at least I saw, right? You have a five parts or 5 pieces or 5 NFTs, or yes, or it's one NFT or.
Yeah, so maybe I explain a bit how it works.
Yes.
This spell also had 4 variants that you could cast. So basically, put your hand in your wallet after months of a process of self-purification and building an altar and casting it. I mean, it's not just a thing that you do; it's something that you really need to prepare for. But the story goes, when you're ready to cast the magic, you can either summon gold coins, silver coins, small silver coins, I don't know what they are, or copper coins. And I like the number 5, so I added, and I thought that it's appropriate that the particles, the small amounts of money from Ethereum is called dust. So I added that, yeah, that is dust. Then I took these magic squares and I built all kinds of textual pyramids out of them. By pyramids, I mean that the text is kind of slowly building. So if the word is enchanted of matbea, which literally means coin, it will go ma, mat, matbe, matbea, matbea, matbe, like up and down with word counting. And that's quite a traditional Jewish mystical tradition of following that text is what generates reality. And if the world was created using text, in Genesis, God says, let there be light, and that's what makes light. When you create or decreate or deconstruct or destroy a text, you actually make these entities appear or disappear. So if I want to summon an angel or a demon, I might say their names in this kind of ascending order. Or if I want the demon to go away, I will slowly erase their name. So I took these pyramids and they gave me all kinds of interesting structures, and gave them to an artificial voice, text-to-speech model of Google. It's the Google Wavenet. Mm-hmm. To chant, and like any instrument, I like looking for its edges or the points where it reveals a bit the grain of its voice. And so I pitched it and played with the parameters until I ended up with some voices that I liked. And then I composed with them. I recorded them and added more layers, mostly of from a synth. It's quite minimalistic in that regard. It's just one voice and one synth that is playing all kinds of layers. It's peak. It's a nice analog polyphonic synth. And then I composed these five different variants. Now, the other important element of the work is that I tried to draw as much for the logic of how the work is formed from the technology itself. So we had many discussions of how maybe to make it interactive, or maybe to make it into a kind of an NFT that you can only interact with it on certain dates and certain phases of the moon, to kind of really hardwire into the code the fact that it wants to say something about this relationship between it and the world, and that it kind of functions as a kind of an incantation of a spell. And what we ended up doing is both that these magical square are on the code itself, are in the smart contracts of the NFT itself. So kind of, the text is ingrained in the code, and then there is no image to this NFT. The image is a QR code that sends to where the file is located, because a lot of the critique on NFT is this right click and save, that it's just images that you can download. There is nothing integral to the way they're constructed. You can just generate them, and it's a bit arbitrary. So my reaction to that was to store the 5 sound files themselves on a platform called the Inter-Planetary File System. Another magical name. Like, what the fuck is that? And that's actually a kind of a peer-to-peer internet that they're developing. It's quite a fascinating technology, a bit like torrent, but for everything, and it's decentralized and quite robust. And what it does is that you have a hash, you have an address to this file, and when you play it, it actually seeds it in more computers. So if you play it from the exhibition, it will actually seed the file further in places that are closer to to the computer, from the machine from where you summoned it. So it, in a way, magical attractor. So in the gallery, there are 5 QR codes, and you can scan them with your phone. They're headphones, and you stream them from this interplanetary file system, and by that you kind of make them come closer, at least virtually, to the space where you are. And again, it plays on this offline existence of the thing. It was the exhibition was online. Probably there's a link somewhere around our conversation to where people can see it. And an image that I sent you is how it looked like in the exhibition space, where I really wanted to again make this direct connection between technique and magic. And I found that the image of a candle burning on top of an iPad, that is just like this contrast of these 2 lights, the cold LED, I mean it's white, but it comes across as blue, and the warm flame is quite this kind of a low techy, but had kind of an interesting aura, and that's kind of what gives light to the different QR codes that are hanged, kind of floating behind it on the wall.
Okay, so right, just I will tell you how I understand. Right, I'm in this virtual exhibition. Right, I can do with my phone. I can scan a QR code, and then I have access to SoundCloud, to sound, right, and to some kind of video or what, or light, or yes, or what
Okay,
is that?
so not exactly. In the physical, like in the real world, in the offline world, you can scan the QR code,
Yes.
which sends you directly to the file.
Okay.
So in that regard, it deals with decentralized technology, but it's not, you don't even come through anything that is officially an NFT. In the online exhibition on the website of Process and Protocol, you can click it. There is a different representation of these pentagram of magic squares, and you can click on them, and then it takes you to OpenSea and to the storage of the file. That is also is linked to the contract, but it's always you always end up streaming it from this decentralized platform, the IPFS.
Yes, yes. And the content is a video, right?
No, so there
or
is
sound
that's the other thing. It was really important for me not to surrender to the board monkeys and to the generative visual art, and that's why I didn't include any kind of visual. It's basically text.
It's only sound
that is being generated. It's only sound.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Only sound file, right?
Yes, it's basically a piece of electronic music, but I think that the the conceptual wrapping of it and the way that it is presented kind of is what makes it, I hope, more interesting.
Yes, and I still understand, right? So I have a 5 QR code, so I can start this journey as I want, right? So there's no pass.
True.
Right?
Yeah, it's a bit like these strange voices are stuck somewhere in an orbit in the interplanetary space or void, and they try to chant and to cast this magic, whether successfully or not, and so each of these static. They have their tonality, so to speak, but there is no development between them. Each is just based on the phonemes, words of magic square, and just making it disappear.
And how you came to the title of the piece?
So sigils are exactly that. They're kind of these pieces of stone where you can etch those magical things and use them as talismans or as things to protect the homes. And generally I thought that, okay, if I'm dealing with this thing that is so hot in popular culture as well, like it was in the peak of it, I thought of, let's just put a name that would be a bit over the top, like that it has no intellectual cold distance. It's just, what is it? These are Sigils of Sacred Magia. It sounds like a beginning of a fantasy book for teenagers, or something like that.
Yes. And what's the main message, right? What you wanna send by this?
Yeah, the question of a message is a tricky one, because I guess that if I had such a condensed message, I could just write it and I wouldn't need to go process of composing it and developing it as a piece. But I'll still try. I guess it has to do with how uncanny all this is, and that if it will still catch, for instance, we'll all have only smart currencies, and we'll have our Ethereum, and everything will be decentralized. It will be such a shift that, on the other hand, we're already there, right? We are using our smartphones constantly, and our bank accounts are virtual. But there is something for me that feel like that often could come across as, again, this cold or too technical. The telos of technique is always, you know, to put you in a list, and to just verge on the edge of the spectrum of essentialism. It's like you're you, and that's your name, and that's your address, and you can never transcend it, and you can never be anything else. And I try to really live by this more mystical way of viewing the world as full of magic, and go through this process of re-enchanting the way that we perceive the world. And so I guess this for me was a playful or tongue-in-cheek attempt to make these kind of loops of meeting points inside this cold, sterile, disinfected space. We're now talking over Zoom that took over in the in the pandemic, because every world is full with viruses and dangers. But also that in this brave new world, there could be a lot of small pockets where we can actually cast magic or play what if, because it's not even about whether it's real or not, because as I said before, like, you can ask the same thing about all currencies or about all of our social constructs.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So is it more like, for you, it's like more like a social anthropological piece, where you just you somehow, for you find and you try to communicate what social currencies, what this not social, what decentralized world, and what NFTs and what these coins and tokens are, but in let's say in more social anthropological language, whereas magics, witchcrafting, and all that stuff. Is it that what you want, like, more to?
Well,
or it's more social critique, right? It could be a social critique, just watching me.
But I think it could be both. I mean, the critical element here is not so much at the forefront, and that's why I said that it's a bit tongue in cheek. It's a bit this kind of like ironic take on this whole, also on this whole craze. And this is why also I don't think that anyone has, I'm actually pretty certain nobody has bought it, and it wasn't made as a commercial thing, because and that's also why it's priced as the currency of one. It's always will be the price of it. It's one ether is each, regardless of like how much does ether worth, because again, in order to measure something else, this thing also of measuring and comparison leads me to, and perhaps there it could remind a bit of an anthropological way of viewing and listening to the world, because it does deal with this kind of stories we tell, and mythology and concepts through which we relate to the world. But having said that, I think that a key aspect for me in my artistic practice is that no matter what kind of critique or politics or things I bring in from the world, if I want to make it into an artistic experience, it has to communicate itself. So also this thing, I think it could work, and actually it was very nice. The Process and Protocol exhibition drew, it was in Akud, and it drew quite a different crowd than the common new music people. So there were also quite a few young people, and the reactions were really nice, because they basically spoke about it being evocative or being spooky, or that you don't know what it is exactly, but that it feels enchanted, and all these attributes that I hoped that it will convey. but it can just function as music to listen to. And if you're more, if you're curious to know what's behind the scenes, then you can read and think, oh, okay, it's coming from so and so. And if you're super curious, you can, Google it and get to this obscure interview on YouTube where I'm discussing all the details of really under the hood. But it must function also as the medium that it communicates through. And in this case, it was an installation of light, an object on a wall, and 5 short pieces of music.
Yes, good. And right, you said that for creating these sounds, right, or sounds for each of these particular part, or which you use artificial you use software which creates artificial voices, right? So what was the reason behind what kind of feeling or what kind of impact you want to create for me as a listener, please?
So it's divided to the conceptual level and the more phenomenological or material level. On the conceptual level, I thought that it's really nice to not to have an actual human, but to have to capture, because the NFT is also something that you generate a file and then that's it. You can't change it. You can't replace it. It's there on the blockchain, theoretically or in the IPFS, theoretically forever.
Yes.
I thought it's nice to capture the state of these algorithms of the text-to-speech artificial voices in that particular point of time, because they always change. And even now, I think 8 months later, they're already, I don't think that the Google WaveNet have changed already, but there are so many, like in the last 4 or 5 months, there is an explosion, with the V2 and all these, free tools that are coming, of more and more of these artificially generated images and sounds and etc. So I thought it could be quite interesting both to capture the state of where was it at that particular point of time, as well as if we're dealing with this idea of generating value out of nothing, then it's not my voice or some voice actor or singer's voice that is being recorded and captured and they enact it. It's the machine from the get-go. We are inside this. We're inside the machine, and perhaps there is it's kind of a Deus in machina. The God never leaves.
Yes. That's the idea, right? The voice represents concept of technology. Maybe not particularly that technology, but technology, right?
True. And then there is also the material level, which is that these voices, I think still now, I find that they're in a fascinating place, especially coming from this kind of, contemporary music, experimental music that we deal with, what sounds can an instrument make, and looking for its edges and complex sound or sounds that break, etc. Because they are almost human. They're in the midst of this uncanny valley of human, not human. What exactly is happening here? Is it a witch? Is it someone that smoked too much? Is it a machine? But damn, this machine sounds really, really good. I later used it in another piece. No, oh my God, what is time? I used it before in another piece for ensemble and a light artist, where the same voices, they sometimes sing songs, or they chant kind of songs, or they give somatic instructions. And I feel that this this dissonance between the disembodied voice of the machine that doesn't know what is his hands or his neck or his feet, and is persuading you to feel your neck, feel your sit bones, feel your weight, feel your feet on the ground, When I say it, it makes a lot of sense because both you and I have bodies and we can relate to it. But when I give this kind of voice that is, it sounds good enough for me to listen to it as a voice, but it still is kind of artificial or strange, or something is off with it. And yeah, I think this sonically it's a really really interesting instrument. And I tried emailing Google to ask them if maybe I can get like a frozen version of the code now before they make it too good, because of course that's what will happen. It will be at some point, it will be, the models will be so good that it would almost be indistinguishable, and then it will be boring. I mean, it will just be okay.
Got it. Can you tell a little bit about what was the process of creating it, right? What when you start, how long it take, and what kind of stages you go through?
So I think part of the thing with my practice is that I try to expand it. So to go towards more media, more genres, collaborating with people, doing serious artistic research, making instruments, immersing myself in different kinds of processes. So in that regard, each project has its own logic and its own path. And here it was really nice because it was collaborative in a sense of these discussions with Daniel and Brandon, and also with a friend, an artist friend, Ido Gordon from Tel Aviv, that helped me figure out the visuals and the details of the installation. I'm of the position that at this point I know that I try to be transdisciplinary, but I know that my expertise is sound and music. And so if I need to deal in a deep enough level with technology or with something that is visual or sculptural, I will always go and find someone to correspond with and to get the help and the expertise I need in order not to do too many things on a superficial level. So here it was a lot through these online talks. Brandon is now in Sweden, Daniel is in Canada, I was in Berlin. It was still kind of COVID, everything in the air. And we discussed a lot how to, what could it be and how, and then slowly, as it materializes, then giving feedback, so making all kinds of versions until it felt that it's the right thing, all the way to the level of the naming the files, because again this becomes very charged decisions to make when what you are doing is very explicitly and in an aware gesture you're generating a file at the end of the day. So here it was a lot of these talks and sharing references and sharing like a long Google Doc where we exchanged links and ideas and thoughts and tasks. And then when it became clear that it's going to be this chanting of the spells, then I spent probably like a week just with a Google WaveNet of just generating and playing a lot with files, and then I put it aside so that my ears don't get fatigued, that I don't get too used to it, going back to it, starting editing, taking distance, editing the voices. And then kind of when I had the voices, that only then I added the synths. And as a kind of an accompaniment, I wanted them to be like a kind of a bit of an indifferent ensemble that is making both the atmosphere and the counterpoint and where is it happening, give the musical space for it. So it involved a lot of improvising, collaging, editing, sometimes thinking, okay, I want to now plan something that would be here accelerating. Also, I will sketch, you know, some kind of like a pre-score kind of dribbles, and will then try to play it out on the knobs and layer it. And then a lot of mixing, and then developing the installation of how to present it, how to mint it. That was pretty much the process. Nothing.
And how long it took?
All in all, we worked on it like 5 months, I would say, like over 5 months.
And
Yeah.
And what kind of software you use for this piece?
So it's mainly Ableton, and I mean, but Ableton as a kind of a mixing desk, because most of the sounds come from this peak. And I also use some Max for Live devices for all kind of panning and Doppler effects and stuff like that when I want to make the mix, the sound field feel bigger. But yeah, it was generally, you know, and Word for typing the like a text editor for the text, and then the peak and everything recording into Ableton, mixing there, some plugins, like the usual stuff, nothing fancy.
Can you imagine the same piece, but not using NFT technologies, right? Just the sound file.
It's a good question. Probably not. I think going back to this piece that started this, actually behind me in the studio, you can see the magic square for it.
Okay.
From 2015. There, at some point, the trombone player needed to tear it like along the lines with the sound of the paper tearing. And of course, it's a very different setting. Yeah, there, you know, we can speak about translation. The Hebrew source was lost, and I translated it back to Hebrew from to English and one German source. And what does it mean to go back to this text and then to set it to music? But it was a concert. It was a concert setting. It was 2 male voices surrounded by a small chamber ensemble of 4 instruments, surrounded by 4 speakers. So this kind of like nested squares in this magic square. And I'm describing it in a way to say that I really try to listen to the context and to design the work according to the settings where it's going to live, where it's going to be, when it's going to be performed. And same here, like so much of it was a direct reaction to this idea of an NFT, and an NFT that is going to be non-commercial, you know, that it's not non-commerce, also that it's private. Commerce is this thing that is societal, but you have like a personal interaction with it. The inclusion of the IPFS and all this technology, it's kind of, I feel at this point it's ingrained in the work. And if it wasn't an NFT, or I mean, it's a bit more than an NFT. It's a work that reacts to the idea of the crypto space, because like the NFT, okay, you have the magic square ingrained on the smart contract, but as you can also experience a work in the gallery, you kind of skip the NFT part. I think it's both, and then in that regard, it's also no surprise that I use the artificial intelligent voices, because it's like it's in the air. It's like
yes.
A very it's almost like a kind of a log journal of like where was my relation, you know, in this phase of the technological revolution, like in the after second wave of COVID, for an exhibition that deals with music and crypto. So yeah, I think the short answer would be no.
Yes. But can you imagine the same piece as an NFT, but let's say without sound?
Yeah, that would probably be possible, but I mean, if I was a generative artist, or dealing with animation, or with all kinds of, or even a typography artist, that I would really make it into, you can just basically mint them as images. I don't find it so interesting, to be honest. But I mean, to answer your question, yes, it's possible. And perhaps it's just my own fixation, because I relate to the world through primarily my primer mode is through my ears and through my body, and trying to be with my ears over time. Sometimes we call it listening. Yeah, I'm more interested in these kind of experiences, and also that's kind of the works and the projects that I usually develop. I guess that's my mediumal limitation.
In this interview, you several times said, right, that you actually you have very deep conversations with people who helped you, right, in different ways to create the piece, and how these conversations and how work with them shaped the piece, right, to your mind.
I think it's part of a more broader trajectory that I've been taking over the last 6-7 years already, of really systematically collaborating with other people, and not just think as an individual author. I found it at some point I was a bit tired of working just by myself and just listening to my own ideas, and I thought that both my practice, as well as my politics, or what I think, that the way that I think that we should be making art, and we should be making music, or musicking, should reflect something that is a bit more than this trope of individual genius. Not that I'm that, but I didn't want to hold this position anymore of just me as a single man telling you exactly what to do. And so this kind of led to even developing this process of correspondence, of slow exchange over ideas and references and thoughts and feedbacks, and jour fixes of meeting with friends once a week, with some friends once a month, depending on the project, devoting time for intensives. With my trio, the Sono Choreography Collective, we often take like twice a year that we'll have like a week-long thing that we just come together and practice and share our practices and teach each other. And then also using, of course, the online. We have a Jitsi room where we meet regularly. We have a shared Dropbox where we exchange references and sounds and images and videos and books and whatnot. And specifically for Sigils of Sacred Magia, it was exactly that. It was, for me, a lot of learning from Brandon and Daniel about what do they think, like what's their take, and what do they see happening in the space of Ethereum and Polygon. That's where we minted at the time, and why do they think that it's interesting, that it's important. Being a bit more techno-skeptic in that regard, it was a bit of like polite arguing or confronting the different positions. And then also with all these treading the line between the reality and fantasy and magic and the technical. It was always interesting to have their takes, whether whether verbal in conversations or in our kind of log journal on the Google Doc, that really became another space for the collaboration. I guess it influenced mostly the thinking and deciding in a way. Yeah, it's one of these works that I really consciously decided that I'm gonna think a lot about it in order to kind of work less. Not that it was less amount of work, but at the point that I started composing, it was also actually very clear. It's more coming from visual art practice. Now I'm gonna realize this. I'm gonna have the Google WaveNet chant it, and I'm gonna dub it with all these synth spaces, and then I'm gonna mix it. It was, of course, it took the time. It took probably about 2.5 months, but it was quite direct. But in order to get to that point, it was another 2.5 months of only thinking and discussing and exchanging references. And have you seen this project? Have you seen that? What did you think about this and that?
Got it. And looking back, right? And what are the 3 main learning points, right? What you learned as composer and as creator during creating this piece, right?
It's interesting because you learn so much all the time that it's almost difficult to break it down to like a list of 1, 2, and 3. I guess I always learn. Let's start from the most boring thing, perhaps. It's like that every work I compose teaches me something about composing and making music. This kind of like electronic fixed media, 5 pieces for artificial voices and synths. There are many challenges of orchestration, of energy, of texture, of form, of contrast, of the mix. Oh boy, I spent so long to get it like to the right points. And yeah, before our conversation, I listened to it now, and I always like, if I had more money, I would send it to a professional mixing engineer, or maybe I could have done a better job. But in that regard, like technically, you learn by doing, and I really believe in learning by doing rather than just, I don't know, reading a text or teaching myself something how to do without actually doing it. You go and you do it, and next time you do it better. And then, of course, I learned a lot about technology and about crypto and about blockchain and about smart contracts. And I think the potential of these things is huge. And I think it's still a bit too exclusive in a way, in the sense that it's mostly developed by tech people, a bit too male dominated, a bit too white, a bit not enough thinkers and critical thinkers and artists that will tell the programmers that perhaps you're venturing in the wrong direction. But I still think that, I'm not entirely sure about the currencies, but the idea of the blockchain, of this decentralized list that you and me both have a verifiable information that is the same, has a tremendous, could have tremendous implications. And really diving myself into it, perhaps I'll finish with an example of where you can find yourself when you work this way. Brandon and I found on a Discord channel. Actually, Brandon found him, but we got on a video call with someone who is developing this IPFS. So he's a programmer. He's deep in the protocol. At the time he was doing something about these Twitter profiles that you can kind of get your own custom color codes that will be yours on the blockchain. And we were meeting with him in a virtual room, And we spoke with him for like 40 minutes. And in these 40 minutes, I think I understood maybe 25% of what he was saying, because he was so energetic and so enthusiastic and actually very convincing, just telling you about how great this thing is, and they're all developing it, and it's the new internet, and it's going to do so and so and so, and it's working so and so and so. And at the time, I thought of maybe there would be something in the IPFS technology that could give me a clue about the duration for the piece. Maybe it could be, certain sample rate or simple file size, or certain duration that would be more favorable for its hashing. Again, I was kind of trying to get as many anchors, formal anchors for the work from the setting. And I was asking him these questions, and he was responding with the most elaborate and also beautiful in a way, technical explanations that, again, I just got glimpses of, because I'm not a programmer. But it was just so beautiful to see. It was very humbling. Like, someone is now talking to you, and he just takes for granted that you understand what he's talking about, but you don't understand. And yet you have this experience of like, oh wow, I understand that there is so much that I don't know, that this ocean, this open sea, is really super vast and deep, and there are many people devoting most of their waking hours to contribute to this space. And I guess I didn't experience it in that resolution before.
And the last question, what would be your suggestion to some other composers who would like to create some NFT piece, but still didn't have this experience, right?
Well, actually, the entry barrier is non-existent. You can just mint. Is really not a. It's in this sense, it is quite inclusive. There is nothing preventing you from doing it. But I think that if we take seriously the position of art music, then just minting your piece of music or a song or any kind of sound as an NFT, just like that, could be quite banal. And on that regard, I think quite a good example is, and you've interviewed him, is Dimitri's crypto silence, because it's this kind of like a very simple and a very clever gesture of just taking, a very both conceptual and material reality of silence, and the historical reference of John Cage doing it in the concert hall, but now translating it to this new space. It's like, okay, we have a beautiful marriage of idea and manifestation, and I understand why it's an NFT. What is it doing there? So I think if I need to consolidate it into a piece of advice, and perhaps it's also reflecting on my process with Sigils of Sacred Magia, is that once we venture into this kind of more media arts territory, we really need to be more rigor with our thinking, because what we are taught in the conservatories and in the academies is how to organize sounds in an effective or beautiful or interesting way. But to really, to make it strong and interesting and relevant and fresh in this kind of emerging technology field, you really need to think hard. Like, what's your take on it? Why would it be an NFT? Like you asked before, could it also not be an NFT, or could it be an NFT that is non-sonic, non-musical? Like, and if the answer is yes, then why do so as an NFT? And yeah, think more.
Thank you very much for the interview.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It was nice.